Prime Minister continuing to take questions, both sides of the House. We can hear you a little bit clearer now. It was your turn.
Yeah, so the point that I was making is that the idea that a no-deal Brexit, which is what people like Tom want, won't cause huge problems for ordinary people across this country is just fantasy. The idea that we should just say to our European partners we're not going to cooperate and suddenly that's going to leave us in a stronger position is just fantasy. Ultimately, we are facing catastrophe if we don't find a solution through this, because there is no deal that will get a majority in the House of Commons. So go back to the people again, give them the option to remain. Let's have some clarity on your side. You can make your case. On my side, we'll make our case. But at the moment, we are going to end up damaging our economy and damaging our society.
Let him make his case.
The idea that a second referendum would offer any kind of clarity whatsoever is for the birds. It's fantasy politics. Another referendum, or asking the people again, and when they come out, quite likely as they would, with the same answer they gave you last time, what's going to happen? The elites in this country... Let me have a long time. What's going to happen is the elites in this country will then go again and again, asking the people until they get the right answer. It's ludicrous. When what it means, the longer we prolong this and delay this, it means less investment for firms, it means more uncertainty for families and businesses, and that's what you're going to throw this country into. No, we have to have a clear plan. We have to leave on the 29th of March 2019, otherwise you throw the country into deeper chaos.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
It's so important that we leave this tricky situation that the country is facing right now with incredibly divisive politics. We've heard it from protesters surrounding us today. I don't want that to go on for years and years to come. I want us to have a final decision that we made in 2016 respected and enacted. The politicians told us they would respect it and enact it. There are so many people trying to go back on their promises.
Two or three quick points. Number one, the idea that people like Jacob Rees-Mogg or Boris Johnson, or indeed, dare I say it, you, Tom, reflect the average person, the average Joe who's going to be impacted by Brexit.
What percentage of hedge fund managers voted Remain?
Is absolute nonsense.
What percentage of bankers
with respect, you asked me to listen to you, I asked that you listen to me. Every single credible, respected analyst, when they're looking at either the government's deal, and this is also the government's own projections, so the government's deal or no-deal Brexit, say that it's going to have a hugely damaging impact on our economy, a hugely damaging impact if it's no deal on our ability to get medicine in, our ability to get planes coming into the country and going out. It will be hugely damaging. So it might be easy for you, Tom. It might be easy for you, Tom, to say no deal, no problem. But for the majority of people in this country, they cannot risk that damaging impact. And just to finish this point, if you genuinely think that the majority of people, the will of the people, is still to leave the European Union, then you have nothing to fear from a people's vote. The reason why you don't want it to happen, the reason why Brexiteers overall don't want it to happen, is because you know that the will of the people is changing.
That's a fair point.
It's totally wrong.
So why not have another vote?
All of the polls, I think Vote Leave 2 would be even more cracking of the establishment than it was last time. But the idea that you can pretend to be a champion of the everyday man and woman on the street is extraordinary. It's the hedge fund managers, the bankers, the Goldman Sachs of this world that is funding you and your campaign. And the question, what was your question that you posed to me?
My question is, how can people like you, people like Jacob Rees-Mogg, people like Boris Johnson, who are the epitome of the elite in many ways, how can you say that...
The question is, should there be a second referendum?
Absolutely
why would
not.
You not have
and
a
I'll tell you why not.
If you think the answer's going to be the same?
Well, it would be the same. It would be a pointless waste of hundreds of millions of pounds holding that referendum when we're going to get, in all likelihood, the same answer. And what you need to answer, actually, is if you think that Brexit is so damaging in the first place, if you think that Brexit is such a disaster for this country, why give people the option of voting on it? Because really, in terms of what you said in the last referendum, you're saying exactly the same stories. You're pointing to the same economists and the same organisations that said the same thing 2 years ago. And we're going to go on this merry-go-round for years and years to come if we get your way.
Let him answer.
Right, so two quick points. On the latter point about what economists have said. Economists ultimately said that Brexit would be damaging to our economy, and what have we seen since 2016? The fastest growing G7 economy, now we're one of the slowest. Businesses not investing because they're not sure what's going to happen after March 29th, and they're fearful about the impact of Brexit and our inability to access the economies of our European partners. But
Yes, you can in a second.
Fundamentally, the reason why I think there should be a people's vote is because I am a Democrat. I think that the decision should not be the decision should not be taken by MPs. They are incapable of making the decision because there is gridlock in Parliament, in the Commons. So yes, if people want to have a no-deal Brexit or a hard Brexit now that they have more information 2 years on, absolutely fine. But there is nothing anti-democratic with saying to the public, if you have changed your mind, you should have the right to do so. There is nothing anti-democratic.
Come back on the economy first of all.
On the economy, what we've seen is actually the UK is the fastest growing European economy in the G7. We're growing faster than Germany, than Italy, than France, than all of these sclerotic European countries. And actually, where the growth is are in the countries of the further flung reaches of the world. America's growing quickly, so is Canada, so is Japan, so is China. Actually, and your second point in terms of investment, any delays are happening because there's uncertainty. You would create more uncertainty by putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. And finally, on your point of democracy, democracy relies, and anyone who's read any democratic theory knows this, democracy lies on a concept called loser's consent. If you lose a vote, you have to allow the political process to go on. And at the moment, campaigns like yours are trying to undo the fundamentals of democracy in this country.
A couple of very, very quick points. So number one, I don't think you can credibly say that our economy is working and growing properly for the average person in this country when you're seeing lack of investment in our hospitals, lack of investment in our schools,
is getting 394 extra million
the 350 million Brexit dividend is an absolute fallacy, which is well known. If you go around this country and you see rising homelessness, rising child poverty, you see a government that is incapable of doing any domestic policy because of Brexit. Because of Brexit, the idea that it's working for the majority of people in this country is nonsense. Number two, the idea that things will suddenly become clearer if we either have the government's deal or a no-deal Brexit is genuinely absurd.
Okay.
No, you're living in a fantasy land if you think the country was rosy and fine and there was no poverty and everyone lived in gilded streets of gold before the referendum. So let's not blame all the problems of this country on Brexit and think all the good things are because of
Gentlemen, let's not talk over each other. Tom, you'll go.
I mean, the idea that there weren't serious problems in this country before the referendum is totally wrong. And so to then blame any problem that exists in this country on Brexit and say any piece of good news, as we've had dozens every week of despite Brexit stories, of more investment, of growth, of higher wages. All of these stories come out every week and it's always reported as despite Brexit. Well, actually, maybe, just maybe, Brexit Britain isn't that bad off after all. And this country has a lot to offer, whether or not we sign ourselves up to people within Brussels who make our laws for us. It's so important that us as a nation can stand on our own 2 feet in the world, as almost every other country in the world does. Canada isn't applying to join America. Japan isn't applying to join with China.
I would never argue that our country was happy and rosy in 2016. Why did people vote for Brexit? Many of them voted for Brexit because they wanted change. They didn't believe that the economy was working for them. They didn't believe that the political system was working for them. But the challenge is, how can you say now that Brexit will be the solution to those problems when you can see that our economy and our society it is absolutely not. My point is that whether it's you or whether it's Jacob Rees-Mogg or Boris Johnson, you do not care about the working classes of this country. What you have done is exploited fears in order to suggest that a simplistic answer of leaving the European Union would provide answers to the challenges.
Don't make me have to stand between you, gentlemen. Don't make me have to stand between you. Your turn.
This is the kind of nasty personal politics that we get out of a second referendum.
Not about
this is why it's so important.
It's about
this is why you just said that I don't care about the people of this country. I take great offence to that, and I think that it's important that we don't foster this kind of division, because it's better when we don't fall out over politics, when everyone can get along. And it's so important to put this nasty period behind us and actually come together as a country. Once we've left the EU on the 29th of March, we'll be able to do that. We'll be able to build those bridges again. And by putting it off and putting it off and putting it off, we'll put ourselves in a horrible place.
Fantasy politics is a phrase that has been used a lot in this conversation. I think the epitome of fantasy politics is to assume that either a no-deal Brexit or the government's deal will suddenly lead to all of us joining together after March 29th and saying, oh, everything is happy now, we've got clarity, let's all go into the sunlit uplands together. It absolutely won't. What I am suggesting is that you go back to the people and they have the final say. If the public believe in your vision of Brexit, put it to the public again, and do you know what? For many Remainers, we would say, and I include myself as one of them, we would say, do you know what? With more information, with more detail, at least that's what the public has decided. But if they choose to change their mind, that is democracy.
Gentlemen, stand by, if you would please. Back to you in just a second. You need to make way for John McDonnell, the Shadow Chancellor, who is joining us from Westminster.